So this is going to be another quick lesson that's mostly about essay approach, I suppose, essay technique, how to plan a question. Most people, when I start teaching them, they've no idea what a plan is or how to do one, and they either spend way too long, like 15 minutes on it, or they don't do it at all and they skip it and they just start writing. Both of those are equally, I'm not going to say bad exactly, but they're not the best way to approach essay writing. You're best off not being scared of plans, practicing planning a lot, making sure that you can plan a really good essay within sort of roughly 5 to 8 minutes you want to get it down to. And it is just something that will make a huge difference to your grades. It will boost your confidence. It will stop you from having that thing you get in an exam where you're sitting there and you're writing and then you suddenly don't know what to say or where to go and you just go off on a tangent. That never happens if you plan properly. So there's so many reasons to learn how to plan. I'm a bit hypocritical when I say that because I did used to not plan when I was at school. But now I'm a teacher, I realise how silly that was and how I should have just gotten over my confusion or fear with planning. So hopefully this lesson will do something similar for you guys. So I've got two questions here. I'm just going to start with this first one. How far does Priestley present Mrs. Burling as an unlikable character? Write about what Mrs. Burling says and does in the play, and how Priestley presents her by the way he writes. So whenever you get bullet points in a question, you do have to address them both. You would get really marked down if you only addressed one of those things rather than both of them, or none of them. You also get marked on how closely you talk about the ideas of the question and whether you can formulate an argument on that question. So instead of just generally coming up with random points, you can somehow tie those together into one single argument that is your essay. So if you've kind of had a bit of practice with planning and you're all right with it, you're not too new to it, you can pause at this point and you can have a go at planning that answer before you read my suggestion of a plan that I did. So I recommend having a go at planning. Time yourself at 5 minutes, stop, see how far you got. If you're not feeling that confident, then you can just kind of keep playing and I'll talk about my plan and then you can have a go at the next one in a second. So pause now if you feel like planning that one and keep listening if you don't. And I'm going to talk about the one that I came up with, the plan that I just did. So the first thing with this plan, the way to achieve a good plan, is you have to make sure you understand the keywords. So I broke it down. So it's how far, just put it in a different colour, maybe green. Priestley, Mrs. Burling, and unlikable. So how far does he make his character unlikable? So it's not just is she unlikable, it's like does he make her that way and why? So you have to kind of get that extra layer of knowledge into your essay if you're going to make the best possible essay on this type of question. So never talk about the characters like they're real. If you have a character focus, always talk about it like that character is one of many characters written by the same person to create a certain effect or response in the audience. So it is asking, is she unlikable? How far is she unlikable? But also, it's about how Priestley chooses to make her seem. So it's not just in herself is she a bad character, it's why would she have been made that way? How far is she bad? And why don't we like her? All of those are kind of tied up in this question. So with how far, it's always an argumentative essay, so we have to say totally, not at all, or partly. So we need some kind of one sentence answer to the question at the end of our intro that properly addresses that aspect of how far. So we say totally unlikable, not at all unlikable, partly unlikable, and why. So we call that a thesis. My thesis that I planned, I did time myself for these as well. So I think they took me 5 minutes, or I just stopped at 5 minutes. My intro was that she's very unlikable, and then I was going to talk about why and what we think and feel and realize about the story. Whenever you go into that, that becomes your thesis. That's your main argument. And your thesis, if you watch my essay writing course, I go into this more, but your thesis should always come at the end of the intro, and all of your middle paragraphs should link back to that thesis as well. So if you're not sure about that, definitely have a look at my essay writing courses, especially the basic essay writing course. So then my middle paragraphs, I came up with different points that prove my thesis. And that's really important, so that I'm not starting with a reference to the text or a quote from Mrs. Birling. I'm starting with a point about the story. So the first one, her appearance shows she's unlikable, and then I can use quotes to back that point up. Second one, she uses class to her advantage and treats people of a lower class than her with no respect. Sorry, I wrote this in a rush. Yeah, she uses class to her advantage, treats people of a lower class than her with no respect. Again, I can use references to the story to back that up, but that's my own point, my own idea that is answering part of why she's unlikable. Paragraph 3, she doesn't believe she's responsible for anyone else. Another reason why she's unlikable. Paragraph 4, she doesn't have a good relationship with her children and treats them like objects. So you can see that those middle paragraphs then, they've broken down my thesis, my overall why she's unlikable, into 4 different aspects of what's unlikable about her. So they would be used to form the first sentence of every paragraph, and then I go into my quotes and my evidence and my references to the story. Really important to get that in your head, because you'll never get a top grade if you start with a reference or a quote. You always have to start with an idea. So my conclusion was that she represents the upper classes. Priestley didn't like them. He saw them as selfish and irresponsible. And to sort of prove this, he wrote the character of Mrs. Birling. So because Mrs. Birling represents upper classes, because Priestley doesn't like upper classes, therefore he makes us not like Mrs. Birling, so that we're persuaded of his opinion on the upper classes. You'll notice I just copied that into my thesis. So sometimes once you've actually thought of your middle paragraphs, you come up with your thesis at that point. It's fine to do it in that order. I almost always do. Because it's kind of easier to think of your individual things you're going to say and then figure out how to tie them together sometimes than thinking of your overall thing first. But you want to make sure you've got that sense of part to whole. So the thesis in the intro represents the whole idea of what you're going to say, and then your middle paragraphs break that down into different parts. So this is my plan. I've not gone into too much detail here as well, notice, because it has to be within 5 minutes. It's not the best plan I've ever written, but it is a realistic kind of plan that you could get down within 5 minutes of planning. So whether you had a go at that one or not, I want you to have a look at this second one now and definitely pause at this point, have a go. If it takes you more than 5 minutes, that's totally fine, because if you're not used to planning, it's going to take longer. And then after you've done maybe 5 or 10 essays, it'll slowly become easier, and eventually you'll be able to do it in 5 minutes. So if you're new to planning and you can't do it in 5 minutes, don't worry at this point, that's totally normal. So yeah, just to recap my process then. Look at your keywords, then think about different points that you might say, then think about what you put in your intro. You don't really have to plan your conclusion. I did in the last one, but it doesn't matter if you don't plan that in the time. So the main thing is your intro, your thesis, your middle paragraphs. And you need a minimum of 3 middle paragraphs to write a good essay. So I'm going to Actually, I'll leave it there because I've written an answer for this one as well. Yeah, I want you to pause now, have a look at this question. Take as long as you like, but time yourself, aim for 5 minutes, and then see how you did in a minute. So you can pause now when you're ready. So hopefully you've had a go at planning. Hopefully you don't find it too hard. I tried to keep it a similar type question, so it is still a character-based question based around the inspector. It's got a similar intro, but it isn't actually how far, it's how does. So it's a discursive, meaning you don't have to answer totally or not at all. You just have to kind of figure out your own ideas about it. It's more of a discussion than an argument, a discursive question. So, yeah, I'd be interested to know what you guys got as plans. You're welcome to send them to me. I'd be really happy to receive plans that people have been doing, give you feedback on them. And yeah, here's my plan. So, my middle paragraphs, if we start with those, the inspector is a mouthpiece for Priestley's own views on society, meaning he represents Priestley's opinion in the story. Another point, the inspector allows characters to think about their past so that they have the opportunity to change. So he kind of is a vehicle for improvement in society because he allows them to reflect and look at the impact of their actions. His final speech shocks the audience into changing. So even though I am referencing a specific point of the story there, the actual point that I'm making is that he tries to shock the audience into changing. So once he's actually shocked the characters on stage, he addresses the audience directly and he delivers quite a frightening fire and brimstone type speech that is intended to persuade the audience further into changing their opinions. And finally, his opinions allow him to criticize normal social attitudes. So the Burlings are quite normal for their time, 1912, and the inspector is kind of unusual for this time. But because we're on the inspector's side, and because of the way that the inspector is super persuasive, we're kind of convinced of his ideas. We're not necessarily in line with the Burlings' ideas, even though they're more normal in society. So these are my individual points, and then my thesis. He's a radical figure who challenges and criticizes socially accepted views. So I'm engaging with this bit, how society could be improved, particularly those about class differences. So I'm being specific in ways that society could be improved. Priestley uses him as a mouthpiece for his own beliefs, which was reflecting this first point, in order to spread his message of social responsibility. I did a YouTube video recently on responsibility in an inspector course, so you can have a look at that if you're interested in that theme, or say this is just a topic that you feel you don't know that much about. You're welcome to just watch that, it's for free anyway. So yeah, you can go to the Scribbly YouTube channel and find the Inspector Calls Responsibility video that I did. I ramble a bit in that one, a bit like today. Yeah, so that's it basically. Whatever you came up with, it doesn't have to be the same as mine, as long as it's in a good shape and you feel quite confident about talking about and picking apart those ideas. That's the main thing. So it's not about me getting the same answer as you when it comes to essays, it's about you creating a good shape to your ideas and having a good depth to your analysis. So as long as you feel like you're kind of getting there, then that's a good, definitely a good start. So I recommend practicing loads of essay planning, way more than you actually write. So say you're going to do an hour of revision, it's probably a better use of your time to spend at least half an hour of that just planning a ton of essays than it is to spend the whole hour writing one essay. Because the more you can plan, the quicker you can think, the quicker you can organize your ideas, everything just sort of comes together more easily and you feel more confident as well. It also helps you identify the gaps in your knowledge. So you might have noticed that Maybe you were really strong on the Mrs. Birling question and you had loads of points, but the inspector you didn't know so much about, or vice versa. That just lets you know your own limitations, and it lets you know what more you need to revise and what more you can do. So that's really good as well. It's good for kind of feeling your way through the text and seeing which bits you need to do a bit more work on before you write essays on them confidently. So I'm going to end the lesson here for now. But like I say, just use this as a starting point. Plan and load more than what we've done together in class. Um, Hopefully you find this really useful, and when you get the hang of it, even though it's hard at the beginning, you'll get to a point where you feel like this is really helpful, and it's definitely going to contribute to your confidence and your grades improving. So yeah, thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys soon.